Right on. Welcome to the Udrcast. I'm your host, Bill Ward, and today we have an awesome man in the house, Buck Breaker. Reuben Breaker is your real name, from Siksika Nation, just east of Calgary. You know, I've known Buck now for, I don't know, probably 3 years-ish, and first met you, I think, at a roundup. I've heard of you for years before that, but I didn't know you. And since I've gotten to know you, I have tons of respect for you. And, you know, I know that you're in recovery. You've had a life, quite a life. And today you do a lot of things to really help our people. And one of those things is you sit on chief and council and try to bring, you know, the creator part of you to all the meetings and what you do and dedicate your life to serving your creator and the people around you. So thanks for coming, Buck. I really appreciate you.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Thanks for having me. It's a true honor to sit in a setting such as this, and just talk about life and our roles, and how we I guess amalgamate all of our skills and everything we have learned along with recovery into our everyday life. Like I said, it's such an honor. I've seen what you've been doing, and it's very innovative. And I think where this is taking our journeys to the next level. With technology and all that, and it's a good thing. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, bro. And like you see this technology around us, and you're in my studio, and like I'm blown away, right? Because this isn't me. This is not me. And like without guys like Mike, who's at the deck there mixing, and the people that have helped me, and you know the guys that have built my websites, and so many people have helped me, Buck. And I really believe it's just because I have helped them in some way, shape, or form. And people by nature really, they want to help each other.
And that's what it's all about, is helping one another. And we have to, I know a lot of older folks who are on this journey who are, very cognizant of, putting things out there. But in all honesty, we've been quiet for so long. Recovery, sobriety, wellness, it's not celebrated or recognized or acknowledged enough these days.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to look far down the street at on the other side of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
So in these dark days, it's conversations such as this that are at least pieces of the puzzle of when we share our story. It can be revisited at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it's when I was taught whenever you get asked to do something, you don't refuse, because that's the creator working through another individual to share my experience, my strength, and my hope with whoever's going to be listening to this.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love that you said, and for our listeners, prior to us getting on, a lot of times I will ask the guest if there's any no-go zones, things that they will not chat about or open up about. And Buck looked at me and he's like, no, man, I'm an open book. He's like, I've shared my story. I'll continue to share my story, and I don't have any secrets. And, I knew years ago when I started this path. So I've been sober 10 years almost, and I quit my career about 4 years ago and didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. But I had a mentor, and he told me, do this and self-brand yourself and do all these things. And I thought he was crazy, and I was scared as hell to do those things. But I listened to him. And I just did what he told me to do. And we're talking like 5 years into sobriety. I'm listening to a mentor of mine verbatim of everything he's telling me to do, because I believed in this guy and it felt right. And one of the things that I remember thinking was, you can't have any secrets. If you're going to step onto the stage and be a loudmouth like you are and talk about the things you talk about, you better not have any secrets because it'll destroy whatever you're trying to build. And I thought about my life, and I was just like, through working with others, through sharing my story, through the deep inner work, I realized I had no secrets. And so I can do that today. And so what has it taken for you to let go of any secrets so that you can just be authentic and share the truth and not worry too much about what the ramifications are going to be? How have you gotten there?
Well, it took many efforts. Well, I wouldn't, because I've been trying to, get out of that life, get out of those patterns for decades. When I first reached out for help, back in the late 90s. And, I've been trying ever since, and I wasn't honest. And I think that's the key in a journey where if I want inner peace, if I want that serenity, if I want to lay my head down at night and have no issues to worry about, I had to be honest. I have to be honest every day. And sometimes so to get there, over the years I've attempted at working on myself. There's different I guess methods and procedures that deal with my past and deal with my patterns. And this last 12 years ago, I was planning my suicide.
How many years sober were you?
So July 12th was my last drink,
Okay.
2012. And I remember that day when I woke up, I was shaking. I just finished a 2-week bender, and there was drugs involved, so I remember that morning I woke up and I thought, you know what, I can't live like this. The world would be better off without me. I'm gonna do it today. And I was at my parents' house, and there was a vehicle there that I used to have. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a license. I didn't have a home. I was gonna jump in one of the vehicles, jump on the local highway, drive in front of a semi, make it look like it was an accident. That's what I was thinking, because I attempted suicide before. And, the higher power up there, even back then, was trying to tell me he has a plan for me. But I didn't want it. So this time, when I was, and I couldn't do that to my kids. I couldn't do a violent act to end my life, because I didn't want my kids to grow up having to, being asked, who's your dad and what happened to him? Can you imagine, having to tell that story or having to lie? I couldn't do that to my kids. So I knew where I belonged, and that's where I went. I went back to the rooms, and so now it's life or death. So when I started in that journey of recovery, I knew I had to do this 100%. I wasn't doing it for anybody because I had nobody. My parents were there, but they've seen this broken record many years. So I just didn't, I didn't want to go back to that life. So now it's life or death. They say when you go back out, and I know this through experience, you go back to where you left off. And, God forbid I take another drink, I'll be going to that. And I know I'll be dead within 2 days. So to answer your question, I had to do whatever it took, any lengths, and that meant cleaning out the backpack. And that backpack was full of junk, things I couldn't get. I think where I didn't want to go, what I didn't want to talk about, what I didn't want to cry about, all these things in my life, right from when I was 3 years old. And that's what I did.
So when you said you had tried committing suicide prior, how many years or so prior?
That was in the mid to late 90s. That's
Okay.
when
And you said that you knew then, or maybe in retrospect, you could see backwards the Creator had a plan for you, but you weren't interested.
No.
Was it you weren't interested, or you weren't awake enough to see it?
At a young age, I was in my mid-20s at the time, and looking now at 20-year-olds, I have my young family, even daughters who are in that age bracket. They're not thinking the long-term things, and I didn't either. All my high school friends already had their degrees and good jobs or companies. I wasn't thinking that. I was already so deep in my addiction. All I thought about was me and numbing all that pain from all those years.
So you couldn't even see it, even if you were looking, which you weren't because you were so distracted with, numbing and being young. And just being young there's so many distractions in being young, and you just don't have that, I don't know what you would call it, that depth of life to understand what life is. And it's still, you think you're young and invincible still, right? So then when you get to 2012 and you're ready to do it again, from the time that you woke up that morning to the time that you went into recovery, when did you realize Creator had a plan, and then you accepted this is it? I'm moving forward with it.
So it was then that I had that spiritual awakening that day. When that moment, that plan that I had, that was my will. But I knew all along, because the years that I've attempted recovery, the seed was planted. Those that tried to help me planted a seed. And I've seen a good life of those who I shared my journey with in my early years. I wanted that. I didn't know how to get it. I just thought showing up periodically and staying away from the bottle, I thought that was it. I didn't have the desire to heal. So I knew where I belonged because I felt a part of, even though I didn't fully commit or surrender to that life, I knew that's where I belonged. So that morning, it was about 2 or 3 hours when I was so lost in the fog. I thought, that's when I started thinking about, staying alive. That's when I thought, what, screw this. I know where I belong. I know where I need to be. And that's where I'm going. That's when I knew the Creator had a plan for me. And that was not to die. So ever since then, I've just lived one day at a time. Staying alive, staying sober, but also committed to doing the work that it does take to stay sober. Because I've tried putting down the bottle, putting down the drug, and saying, where's this good life?
Yeah.
Or praying, praying for these things that my selfish needs. And when the prayers aren't answered, I say, what's going on? I'm praying for these. You're not answering my prayers. I don't believe in prayer. That was my old way.
Yeah.
But now, I've learned so much, and I'll continue to learn. I'll never stop learning.
And I think it's a combination of, in a way, and, you know, and I don't want our listeners to take this the wrong way, but learning how to pray is important. But learning how to pray works in conjunction with your own inner healing. And you had nailed it about 10 minutes ago when you talked about honesty. Like, dude, I thought I was honest, right? I also thought I was a good husband and a good friend, and I thought I was a lot of great things in my own mind. But until I had like lost it all and had to do similar work to you, I realized that I didn't have a relationship with really anyone in my life, including my parents, my wife, my kids. But I did have a relationship with myself because I was very selfish in all my actions. And my prayers were no different in early recovery. And how I had to learn honesty was by doing some of that work, a lot of it written, but having people in my life that were ahead of me on the journey that could see where ego was trying to work, and they would call me out on it. And then many times, Buck, I hated what they were saying. But you know that feeling that you know something's right inside you when somebody tells you something and you know they just are trying to help you, and then you leave and you might be leaving resentful, but you know there's a piece of what they said that is true, and they have no reason. They got nothing to gain for telling you what they've told you. And then I started thinking about those things and looking at it. And I always say, you know, honesty has to be first step. Without honesty, man, everything's crooked. And the thing about a guy like me, and maybe you too, is I can rationalize and justify the most errant bullshit to suit every action that I do in life and every inaction. And so I have to have outside counsel and share parts of my life and get the truth about it, or I go down what I call banana peel trail, right? And if for an addict and alcoholic, banana peel trails can be deadly, right? But that honesty takes years, and a lot of commitment and a lot of pain, hey?
Yeah, exactly right there. I was in so much pain. I had to, for the first time in my life, I remember thinking, I don't want to die. And to reach out, to truly reach out for help, you know, that I had to put my ego aside. And, you know, that's for a man, you know, that's the hardest thing to do, because, you know, we have that image of macho-ness, toughness. You can't, you know, penetrate through my skin, you know, and so, you know, to this day, that's part of the daily work, is to be honest and throw that ego out the door, because I can't live today if I keep the ego and put the honesty out the door. You know, I won't go far. My day will go to shit, and next thing I'm a mess.
Yeah.
So yeah, honesty. It's it's such a it was such a hard concept to work with, because all I knew was dishonesty. I knew how to be dishonest, and to be honest, you know, it took a lot of work, and it still takes a lot of work. You know, I'll never be cured from that hopeless state of mind. You know, every day is a brand new day, and if I want a good day, I remember the good days, and if I want those good days, I got to remember what I was doing to get those good days.
Would you say that the pain that you felt, there's a saying that I say the pain is only pain of the ego, because it's dying as we learn honesty. And I'm going to align truth with honesty. And when I say truth, I mean truth based in love for myself. And on the journey to this love for myself, like real love, not that intellectual stuff that I thought I had most of my life. I mean, the truth of love for myself that I've gained through the work that I've done, to the point where I can make a decision, not good, not bad, and I know it's best for me because I love myself, and I don't have to put up with other people's, codependency or their anger or their whatever it might be. And I can make that decision. And even with work decisions where I don't need to make the decision out of money, I can make it out of purity. And on the journey to this truth or love for myself, I had to stand many times in a fear-based truth along the journey. And as I'm standing in the fear-based truth, and that I feel that pain of the ego, because the ego always produces pain, I could work through that and get to a place where today, like, in many respects, I don't have to justify a lot of what I say, a lot of what I do. I basically never do. But I also got to be open-minded enough to be able to see, you might have been wrong, and I might be wrong. And do you believe that the pain that you felt is just the pain of the ego slowly dying over time?
Yeah, that's pretty deep, but it's pretty accurate. When there's a saying, daily living consists of daily dying. And my ego has to die every day for me to live. So yes, at first it was very painful, because that's what was keeping me alive, was ego. Ego and the macho-ness and all that stuff. But I knew I had to throw that out, because I was on my knees crawling and wanting to die. And like I said, if it wasn't for those who come before me and showed me, or they tried to show me that life is good, but I didn't want it because my ego was too big.
Yeah.
Mind you, I was still doing things that ego led me to a lot of places where I felt alive. Playing hockey, golfing, all these other things that that boosted up my ego. That's what was keeping me alive. But today I can't. I surrender that ego every day, and that's part of that saying. In order to live today, daily living consists of daily dying. So the daily dying, those are those old patterns, those old defects, all those things that used to hold me up. I don't need them to hold me up anymore. I got a higher power. I got my spiritual well-being. I got fellowship. I got family. And that's what's helping me stay alive today. So, I don't need those toxic patterns and mindsets anymore.
Yeah, dude. Kind of going back, what was your line of work back in 2011, 2012, right when you were, burning it down and getting desperate? What were you doing?
I was up north working on the rigs.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, that was a perfect environment. That's like, for me, it was a slaughterhouse, right? Perfect place for an alcoholic addict like me. And I think everybody knows the lifestyle up there. And kudos to those who can stick it out, but I couldn't, because at the tail end of those days, I still had a conscience of being a good dad. I was missing a lot of my kids. I was up there for 21, 24 days hitches, back for 7. I'll drink for 5, and then be hungover for 2, and then fly out on that 7th day. So I didn't see much of my children. I was already in debt with drugs and alcohol. I'd spend it up there. We were in a wet camp, so yeah, it was. I was up there, and just digging myself deeper.
So how did you work your way out of that career?
It's funny. I wanted. My mind was already starting to lean towards changing because I was so much, big part of that pain was being away from my children. And, got so much where I wanted to get fired. I wanted to get out of there. But I have a good childhood friend who was a foreman, and I was an operator, grader operator. And I was the only one out of the crew that knew how to run that. And I would tell my buddy, said, I want to go home. Can you just send me home? He said, I can't. Nobody else knows how to operate. I said, well, let me teach them. He said, we're too busy. We don't have time for that. I said, geez. So I could have just up and left, but, I even back then, I had a little smidge of, being somewhat of a friend. He gave me an opportunity to work, make some money. Mind you, I did support my kids, I did that. But majority of what I made was, contributed to my disease. But I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to get fired. I did everything. One day we took off with the company truck into Fort Mac. We were an hour north to get some of the goods, and we got caught. I thought, perfect, I'm gonna get fired now. But no, we didn't get fired. Another time,
Did you not get fired? And they knew what you were doing too, right?
Yeah.
Because your company's motivation is money, and you were good at helping make money. So in a sense, they'll turn a blind eye to something that you should get fired over and kind of sweep it under the carpet, which is the environment, like, just co-signing, everything bad about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Just
then,
making it so easy.
yeah. And then another time I was intoxicated. My friends were, we caught a cab back from, we got a vehicle impounded, company vehicle. We caught a cab back to camp. And we're sitting outside, with the taxi driver, just drinking outside. And I went outside and used the washroom, and it was caught on camera. And I thought, okay, maybe this will get me fired. But no, all they did was kick me out of camp, meaning I couldn't stay there. They were going to put me in a hotel in Fort Mac, and because they have charter buses going to camp every day. And I said, no, let me just go home. But my cousin who stayed in Fort Mac, he worked for another company. I lived with him, and I did that for 3 weeks. And just continued the pattern. I didn't care. One morning I didn't even go to work, and then that's what he texted me. He said, okay, go home. I said, okay, what flight? He said, no, you're not our employee. You find your own way home. So back then, Greyhound was still up, so I had to catch the bus all the way home. But yeah, that was my line of work. And when I come back, I have buddies back home who were contractors for carpentry, and so I was a flunky for a few days, and then that summer, that was my bottom. I didn't really have a job back then. I was just helping. But yeah, and when I had absolutely nothing.
Wow. Yeah. And then, so you do odd jobs for the next few years, kind of bouncing around, and the money's not that great, and the allure of the up north money must have been in the back of your mind still, because that's hard to shake, right? That money, right? But now you're back in Siksika, and you're just bouncing around. Were you drinking?
No, so when I came back from up north, I was still drinking. The friends that I had who were in construction, that's the life too. You after a hard day, you have a cooler full of beer, and that's when it tasted good. So I wasn't really, I wasn't geared at recovery yet. I wasn't ready to quit yet, because I knew long term, this was in maybe April, May, we have a big golf tournament in July that I knew I wanted to party. And, I said, in the back of my mind, I remember saying, after that, I'll quit. Mm. So sure enough, Stampede, and then our golf tournament. So 2 weeks I was on a bender. That's when but I do remember, making very minimal dollars. But I always remember what my grandparents would say, that no matter how much money you make, it can't buy happiness. And I remember, I was making a lot of money up north, but I was in pain inside.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't happy. So yeah, I had that teaching with me. So when I came back home, even prior to me putting my foot down, and then after, I knew it was going to be a rough journey financially. But
you were okay with that.
I was okay with that. I thought, you know what, I'm just blessed to have a new start.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the best starts are when I had nothing.
Yeah.
And I was taught, you earn what you do, and you value for what you get. So anything that came after, I valued that.
Mm-hmm. So over the next number of years, you must have had a certain type of reputation on the nation for years, and nations, everyone talks about everybody. So you had a reputation, and then fast forward to whenever you're trying to get on the chief and council, right? And when you first put your name in to get on chief and council, what year was that?
That was in November 2016.
Okay. Yeah. Did you get in that year?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you did.
Yeah.
So between 2012 and 2016, did you change a lot and people saw that? And so is that why you got voted in?
Yeah. So, one thing that really changed my mind, or really changed my life, was really fully surrendering to this path that I knew the Creator has for me. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what it was. I didn't plan this. So I just lived one day at a time. I have some people in recovery who got me, some good jobs, and put me in a place where I could be, I didn't have to worry. Mm-hmm. So, I didn't have my license. I didn't have a home. I was staying at my parents' place. But when I started slowly working on myself, and I was, being able to pay off some of these debts, fines, getting my license back, I was able to, work at a point I was doing 3 things at once, 3 jobs, and I was going to school. The thing that really contributed to my journey is when I went to Nietzsche Institute, and it wasn't me that decided that. One of those jobs, out of the 3 jobs, I was water monitor for our health department. So I'd go around and collect water samples at houses all throughout the reserve, and test it, make sure our water is good. And there was a lady who I used to party with, but she knew this was about 2 years into my sobriety, and she knew I made that change, and she was encouraging. And she said, "Come on in for lunch." And so I had lunch, and we were visiting, and then she just blurted out, she said, "You should go to Nietzsche." She said, "You'd be good as an addictions counselor." And I didn't even think that. So it was that point where I thought, that's the Creator using her to send a message to me that's going to guide you to this new journey. So I looked it up, and I applied. I got in. I got certified. And after I got certified addictions counselor, a job opened up at the health center. I applied. I got it. And at the time, there was an older coordinator who was set to retire. So he retired, and I applied for a coordinator position, and I got it. So all that happened within a span of 6 months.
Wow.
And that's why I say I didn't plan this. The opportunities were just laid before me. And when I see every morning, whenever there's a big decision that I have to make, even today, I pray on it.
Yep.
And if there's a knot in my center, I don't, it means step back.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was doing the work in the community, that was when fentanyl and meth started hitting our communities. That was 2015, 16. So I was doing some work in the communities, some awareness, going into schools, even some community events. And it's kind of like our older ways when the elders are watching you and they see you, and then they tell you where you need to go, where you're meant to be. And 2016, that summer, the elders were approaching me. They said, "It's election year. We need people like you." I said, "Oh, okay." But I didn't say yes. I said, "Okay, well, I'll pray on it, and I appreciate your wisdom." But when your elders are saying that, they're already telling you something. So one day at a time, the day of nominations, because people would say, "Are you going to run? You should run." I said, "Well, I'll decide when the time comes." So that morning, I remember nominations. I prayed, smudged, and I asked the Creator, I said, am I meant to do this? Am I meant to put my name in the hat? And I didn't have that knot saying to step back. Mm-hmm. It was more or less, go for it. So I did. 2 elders nominated me. And so there's nominations, and then for 30 days, then elections. Everybody was saying, you should campaign, I said, no, I got work to do. And my grandfather, who was chief, and then for council, he was in council for many years, he used to say that because he never campaigned, and he said, the people should already know you. If we have to go around telling people you're honest, you're hardworking, all these characteristics, he said, then that tells you something about yourself. I said, okay, I'll take that approach, because that's what my mother told me, what she would hear my grandfather say. So I kept working right until election day. I didn't campaign. I went to one forum. I always go to a forum each election that involves the youth, because there's a fee that we pay and then we enter. So I just go to one forum to support our youth, and then this is the 3rd term I've been elected, and every term I do the same. I don't campaign. I just let things happen.
We'll get back to the podcast in a second. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the guest sharing or myself. We have no affiliation with any 12-step or recovery program. And if you do like our work, please consider visiting BILLWARDLIFE and supporting what we do. Now back to the podcast. So, earlier when I said, when you find authentic truth of, yourself, you don't need to justify anything. And your elder was saying essentially the same thing. Like, people should know through your actions and through your integrity, who you are and what you do. And you don't need to justify that. You don't need to go sell yourself, really, because your being, then authenticity will sell itself. And that loving part of yourself will radiate, and people will feel that. And that's exactly what happened. And you were in a good place to either accept you're going to get it or not. Either way, it was going to be Creator's will.
Yep.
And to have that, I call that, I'm able to let go of the body. It's one thing to say you are letting go. Most people aren't letting go of the body when they say, I've let it go. right? The letting go of the body is more important, and it's like a deeper letting go, and where you really don't care or you really are forgiven. And when you get to that point, that's kind of when you get the things that you wanted, but you get them differently because you're a different person as the result of the work and the ability to actually let it go of the body. And so you get this job, and now you've been in it 3 terms, and you're dealing with a lot of social issues. And this podcast, and I know I'm only a few interviews in, and I got a lot of work to do, and I got to learn how to ask the questions and, do more research and whatnot, but, I'll get there. As a nation member, as someone in addictions, and as now a counselor who hears things from a different perspective with the other chief and council members, and you're in politics, policies and procedures and people worried about how they look and blah, blah, blah. How do you navigate the other council members and the people that you serve?
Yeah, that's a pretty overwhelming question when I'm called upon to sit in a circle with 12 different personalities, opinions, and visions. And I got to, when I sit in that circle, like you said earlier, I have to be open-minded. I got to be willing. And I got to be honest. So again, that's where, putting my ego, letting it go. I can't go in there with my will, my wants, because it's not about me. And I'll say that openly. I'm not there for that circle. I'm there for the people that we are called to serve. And there's a saying in recovery: principles before personalities. And in politics, it's the other way around. It's all about personalities, and we forget about these principles of being honest and being helpful, and all these good things that we're called upon to do. And it's not only interior, it's exterior. The other governments that we deal with, and we take a lot of backlash, no matter what we do. There's always, we deal with angry people every day. In that circle, outside in our community, outside in society, there's a lot of people in mainstream society that don't like us for whatever reason. We didn't do anything wrong. We're just trying to survive. So, being in recovery, I just, I apply what I learn in recovery to my role as a leader. And I got to remember that's a role. It's not my life.
Yeah.
Being a man in recovery, that's my life. That's something that I do. And it's a true honor and privilege to be called upon to do that. But I am human. I'm not a machine. And that's some of what the older folks that did this role before me, and I served with some good people who've been around for years. They tell me that. Always remember, you're a human. You're not a machine. And that's kind of the expectations of people in office. And being able to help our people, but at a more a broader perspective. If someone comes to me with an issue, I say, okay, I'll bring it in. But it's not about helping that person. It's about making a change so nobody else comes in with that same issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we're problem solvers. Mm-hmm. We have to solve problems for the whole people, for the whole nation, for 8,000 people, not just for one, for the whole nation.
Roger. And what I love that you said is you play a role, and it's a council member. But you also said that recovery is more of your life. I've looked up the word recovery, and by definition, it means the process of getting well from an illness or an injury. And the illness or injury that we have is, that spiritual sickness. And we're never recovered from it. We're always working in it. And you had talked about, the entities that you're dealing with outside of Siksika Nation and then the politics within Siksika Nation. It's kind of goes counter to the principles. It's always personalities. It's always policies. It's always something fear-based, right? And I think politics, honestly, is a low vibrating entity. And to work within the political system, whether it's chief and council or, Alberta government, Canadian government, or just, an organization where they have a board, working within these policies and procedures. And when you peel back the layers of what the motive behind these things is, it's usually money. And it's fear-based. And it's hard to make change and big change in the world when something is a foundation of fear, right? And so for a guy like you to come in there with, a spiritual skill set and a mentality of, you can only do what you can do, but you do it the best that you can do it. And you can't change everybody's mind, but you bring in your intuition and the creator part of you and that willingness to really serve. Like, that's where it has to go to. And it's almost like, until our chief and councils get healthy, and I'm not saying that yours isn't or is, I think all nations have a lot of work to do within their leadership to get healthy. Because if the leadership's not healthy, then the administration's not healthy, the workers aren't as healthy as they can be, and then the people who suffer the most are the ones who are there to try to serve. Mm-hmm. And I always say to nations that I go to, like, get your administration and your chief and council, like, healthy. And so I'm proposing you, Nancy, who works in the health department, that we do work with your chief and councils. And are they willing to do that? And oftentimes they're not, right? And nor is anybody else. So the ones who suffer are the ones who we're trying to serve all the time. But it has to start with at least one person. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's me. Maybe that's the one we influence in our own nation or our friendships or in our day-to-day lives. And one person, one community, one family at a time. But it's a long game, right? Mm-hmm. Like, just think how long it took you or I to get to the place where we are today. That's kind of like the entity of a chief and council. It's going to take time, and you're dealing with so many pieces of the ego, which are the personalities within the organization. And a lot of the parts of us didn't want to give up easy, right? They wanted to hold on to that thing within us with everything it had. And same with some of the people in the chief and council. It's very similar, right? And so kudos to you to doing what you do and being able to do it in the best way possible and not losing your mind, right? Because a lot of chief and council people, they end up losing their mind and they go crazy, right? And because there is a lot of stress, but I think that's managing it in self and worrying and fear all the time. And you're at the point where you're just like, I can only do what I can do. I'm only human. And you don't even make most of your decisions because yours are mostly made on prayer and meditation, intuitive thought, action and direction and clarity. Mm-hmm. And whether it works or it doesn't, you can only do what you can do.
Yep.
Right?
A big part of, this role is acceptance. Being able to accept that, the person beside me across the table or, is that that's how they are. And I could only control how I react. And, and sitting at so many tables, I've sat at a table across, Trudeau, the premier. And, there's been some times where I had to keep my trap shut because, there's, a big part of my recovery is being able to forgive. And, forgiving these governments that, did what they did to our parents and our grandparents. And even though I wasn't there, it still runs in our blood, that anger, that that hatred, that, we want
sadness.
Sadness. We don't have to look far on social media, on these social media outlets, to see how many people hate us. And for what? We didn't do anything. But so sitting at those tables, and then sitting at the internal tables, like I said, people that get elected in, they do have good intentions. But it's the newer ones that come in and have, I guess, a very small idea of how it actually is in there. How we're so confined to the Western or the colonized way of governance. And learning that alone gets a person pretty upset. And so, it's about keeping that circle united, because this role, we spend more time with those individuals in that circle than we do with our families. If and that's why balance is so important to this life. I do my best not to take work home. My phone is always on, because you never know of emergencies. There's house fires. There's, I deal with, public safety, the RCMP, and different murders and stuff. I'm the one that they contact first. And so my phone is always on. So that balance, it's important that I got to have that balance to say, you know what, if it's not important or not, if it doesn't need, if it's a person that just wants to debrief and whatnot, I could do that in the morning. Usually at the end of the day, my brain is mush from dealing with a lot of stuff. But if it's an emergency, then I have to act on it. So, but the balance of my personal life, my role as a father, I also got to be remember that I'm a son. I got to be there for my parents. My mother was just in the hospital for the whole month of April. Life support for 10 days. And so I had to put that aside. I had to put work aside and say, you know what, my mother is important to my life, and I got to be there for her. And I'm grateful that my colleagues respected that. And, I'll do the same if something happened to any of their family members. I would say, go be with your family. We're here, we'll be okay. So that's, that balance is very important. And I could see how if I didn't have the tools that I have today, I would be so unbalanced. The first year when I got elected, 16 to 19, I came out of the gates flying. I drove myself sick, bedridden sick twice in that term because I was going so hard. I thought I wanted to. I thought I could change the whole nation, and it's just the older guys. They say, slow down. But being back then I was so young. I was so I was so determined. I just kept going. I didn't have no balance at all, and I was bedridden sick twice.
Wow.
So now when I see it, I'm like the old guy sitting on the hill and saying, I had to tell some of the new ones, slow down. Yeah. The work's not going to run away. So, it's part of that wisdom that we gain over years. And, that's something that, we bring to the table. So when we deal with all these, the outside governments and whatnot, that healing, part of that continuous healing is continuous forgiveness. Because in that circle, we have debates. That's what we do. We don't always see eye to eye. We say things, but, we got to be able to, sometimes it gets personal.
Yeah.
And, we got to be able to say, you know what, I forgive them.
Yeah.
I forgive them, or whatever the case may be. Some of the older ones that I served with, after each meeting, would go around and shake each other's hands.
Yeah.
And that was a really good thing that I was taught, and I'll do, because that states whatever happened in here stays in here.
And whatever resentment might have been built during the process of that meeting, it gets dissipated through the handshake, or something happens.
Yep.
And I know that from recovery on people I've resented.
Yep.
I've learned that people that I have resented, I have to go talk to, shake their hand, and maybe even get to know them a little bit so that I can let that go, right?
Yeah.
Because if I just don't do anything, it's like a little root that starts rooting in, and my mind says, oh no, I'm not resentful, or I forgive them. But the reality is I'm not, and it's going to get stronger. And some of the hardest resentments for me to ever get rid of were ones that I did like that weren't really that bad, but I left them untreated.
Yeah.
And over time, it took me a long time to release myself of those. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah. And that's where the honesty comes in.
Right?
And, I've learned that, I got to promptly admit when I'm wrong, but I also need to, if something that's bothering me, I got to deal with that in a verbal. Well, first I got to step aside and say, okay, Creator, I feel this way. I know it's happening to teach me something. Either it's, something for me to learn. And so I have that communion with this higher power that I've surrendered to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I need to talk about it. So I'll talk to somebody that I know who on the same journey as me, so I get some insight. And then if I have to, I'll talk to the individual who I had a quarrel with, and just to let them know, and to let myself know that it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's part of the role. But I got to make sure that I keep up with my daily maintenance. And if I don't do the work that I just mentioned, if I go to bed, lay my head down, and I still have some resentment, I haven't been doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, this role, I don't question it. I don't say, what the hell I didn't want this, but you're putting me here for a reason. I don't think like that. I'm grateful. I say, I thank you for giving me this opportunity, because, I get to help the people, but I also get to learn very valuable living skills myself on a daily basis, and things that I got to work on every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that honesty that we talked about, that's very important. If I'm not honest, then leads to resentment. Then the next thing you know, I'm a dry drunk.
And then the next thing you know, you're a real drunk again.
Yeah, exactly.
Then the next thing you know, you want to commit suicide, and you're not here again.
Yeah, and you'll be seeing me on the funeral card.
Right.
So that's how delicate, my recovery is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be that delicate where I'm walking on eggshells, white knuckling it, but I don't focus on that. I focus on, having a solid foundation every day, so I could stand and not crumble.
Roger that. Okay, Buck, I got to kind of wind her down here, but prior to us, clicking the ons on the cameras, I had many things I wanted to talk to you about, which we did not talk about any of those things. But I think, things go the way they go for a reason. And part of where it needed to go today was, I needed to get to know more of you and hear more of your story and, how you got there. And, I'd love to have you back. And I want to talk about more of what you do and your challenges working with the people in the community as a council member. And then how you navigate that on a personal basis, which you just alluded to, and you have to stay in fit spiritual condition or you can't be effective at your job. But how you deal with these other nations and what are some of the processes and policies and, where do the stalemates happen? And one of the biggest things I want to talk about is sexual abuse within our communities and how that is not been talked about and it gets swept under the carpet. And it's every community and that's at the root of a lot of the addictions, right? And again, I don't want to blame the perpetrator every time, but it's a systemic issue based on what happened over the last 500 years. So it's a result of something, right? And so, I'd love to have you back to do another one of these social impact podcasts, and I do want to have you back to do a recovery podcast. But do you have any closing words for somebody out there, a watcher, a listener who might be struggling with, their own addiction or a bad marriage or their own anger, something?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's pretty hard to tell our story or a part of our journey in one sitting. Like you said, you had all these things all mapped out, and the saying, you want to make God laugh, you tell me your plans.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what? For anybody that's having, I'm going to say, a bad moment, because I firmly believe we don't have bad days. We have a bad moment. I'll speak for myself. I would have a bad moment, but I would milk it for the rest of the day, that I would call it a bad day. I would milk it for the rest of the week. I'd say I had a horrible week. I'll milk it for the month, just on that one basic moment. And it would drag on because it's unresolved. So it's a bad moment. And, a big part of what we talked about today, Bill, was honesty. And it's hard I remember it was very, very hard to be honest, to say, you know what, I am hurt. I need help. The hardest thing for me was to reach out and just to pick up that phone and just to talk, just to connect. Because I remember when I was in these dark places, I had no connection at all. I wasn't connected to my children, my parents. If it was a spouse at the time, I was so disconnected. And that's what this disease wants us, disconnected in this dark place. So I remember how hard it was to reach out for help. And it could be a life-changing decision that could save a life and that could help keep you alive today. Because if we just I remember when I kept putting things off, it just built up, and then I would explode. And, we have too many people in our communities who are walking around hurting. And all it takes is one to reach out for help. And then that's how we could, help heal our communities. That's for another conversation. But yeah, for anybody that's out there, you are not alone. there's people out there who will do anything to help you. You just got to reach out for help.
And sometimes you might have to reach out for help more than once and find the people, right? Because sometimes people reach out, get discouraged. Oh, they don't want to help me. No, that lesson is yours. Reach out again. Don't stop trying is, what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. And knowing who to reach out to. You know, and I remember I couldn't reach out to the people that I used to drink with because I already know what that solution was. And I had to remove myself from the environments because I couldn't go back to the environments that was killing me. So, you know, it's okay to walk away from the party. And, you know, this too shall pass. But, yeah, picking up that phone, reaching out for help is the hardest thing. But once you do it, well, there's so much weight off one's shoulders when you reach out for help, and the other person says, it's going to be okay. Because it is going to be okay.
Yeah. Awesome, Buck. Well, thanks for coming in and making the trip out to Calgary from Siksika to join me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to get to know you year after year, and you know what, I look forward to many more, and really appreciate you being here, my friend.
Right on, brother. You know, the Creator puts people in our paths for a reason, and you know, the work that you're doing, you know, I've noticed it, and I really respect it, and yeah, I'd be honored to come back and share more, real life talk.
Okay, buddy.